Welcome back to Blunt Force Truth, the one-man show where we read the receipts out loud while the rest of the West pretends it lost the wallet. I'm your host, Professional Buzzkill, and if you're listening while nodding along to a diversity training you don't believe in, you are my people. Today, we are doing the thing polite podcasts avoid, giving Donald Trump credit for ripping the mask off Western foreign policy and showing us the flop sweat underneath.
See, Trump didn't do diplomacy like a TED Talk. He did it like a landlord. He walked in, saw Iran, NATO, and the whole Davos fan club living rent-free on American guarantees, and he changed the locks. No poetry, just pressure. And this source nails it with the metaphor. For decades, we just swept the ugly truths under the carpet. Trump just came in and lifted it for all to see. And suddenly, everyone who loves sounding tough discovered they only like the sound.
So where do we start?
Well, we start with Iran, because, nothing clarifies your morals quite like a theocracy that funds terrorism with oil money and lectures you about colonialism. This was the ultimate test case, the catalyst for the whole unmasking, the maximum pressure campaign.
Now, let's be very clear about the goal here. Trump didn't start a war, he started an audit. The objective was purely economic. Kill the nuclear deal, turn on maximum pressure, and just absolutely strangle the cash flow to the regime, with a bullseye painted right on the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps.
And the playbook was simple but brutal. Oil sanctions, banking sanctions, sanctions on the Revolutionary Guard, sanctions on the shell companies that buy their socks. And what happened? The regime went broke, and it went broke fast. We're talking inflation over 40%. The rial completely collapsed. And their little proxy militias, all those franchises of chaos in Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Yemen, they had to downsize. No more free rockets, no more payroll for thugs, just angry memos and carpooling to jihad.
But here's the real kicker. This pressure campaign didn't just expose Iran's weakness, it unmasked us. It put a spotlight on the so-called allies and the so-called adversaries, and showed us exactly who they were when the chips were down.
First up, Europe. This source calls them deserters, and it's hard to argue. Powers like France and Germany built something called Instex, which was basically a glorified barter app, so they could keep buying Iranian oil while pretending to scold Washington. And that told you everything. They want the moral halo and the discount crude. They want to lecture about human rights between shipments.
And then you've got China, playing its own game of what this source calls covert aid. They had their own clever workaround to keep the regime armed, all while keeping their hands technically clean. They figured out a way to have it both ways. And here's how they allegedly did it. Instead of shipping whole missile systems, which would be a blatant violation, they shipped the parts. They use shell companies out of Hong Kong, put the components on cargo ships, and the final assembly happens inside Iran. This gives Beijing plausible deniability to say, we never provided weapons. It's a technicality, but it's how they play the game.
All right, before we get into the really irritating part, let's just take a quick break. If you like hearing foreign policy without the therapy language, go ahead and subscribe. 5 stars if you have a spine, 1 star if you're offended, write mean in the review, and I will frame it next to my gas bill. Now, let's talk about the part that should really get onto your skin, the hypothetical reversal. What happens if all this pressure just gets turned off?
Because the democratic machine is just itching to reverse it. It's the same play every single time. Unfreeze $6 billion? Call it humanitarian. Unfreeze 10 more? Call it de-escalation. Sign a new deal? Take the photo op? Let Tehran sell more oil to China? And then act shocked when the proxies rearm. It's a complete 180 from pressure to apology.
And why? Why this rush to reverse something that's working? Well, the source offers this pretty blunt diagnosis: laziness, stupidity, and hypocrisy. They call Trump's approach unilateral and destabilizing. You know what that's a translation of? It worked without our permission slip, and it made our cocktail party circuit look foolish. The left needs to feel like the hero in the movie, even if the movie ends with the villain getting a nuclear program and a thank you note.
And this gets to the core vulnerability that Trump exposed. We in the West prefer being liked to being safe. And that forces us to ask a really uncomfortable question. It forces us to redefine what American failure actually means.
Seriously, think about it. What does real catastrophic failure look like on the world stage? Is it just a single setback? Is it a messy policy? Or is it something much, much bigger?
The source throws out these wild hyperbolic scenarios to make a point. True failure isn't just losing a battle. It's a complete inversion of the world order. It's when Tehran becomes a financial hub, when the dollar is worthless, when Hollywood is irrelevant, and when American leaders are dragged to The Hague. It's the world completely turned on its head.
And that's the real definition of failure, according to this source. It's not a setback. It is a voluntary surrender.
It's the choice to walk away from power and responsibility because maintaining it is ugly and difficult. We've built a foreign policy culture that manages feelings, while our adversaries manage supply chains.
And that's the bottom line. Maximum pressure won't turn Tehran into Switzerland by Tuesday, but it will keep the regime too poor to project power and too distracted to export revolution. In the real world, that's a win. Real failure is a choice. It's choosing pretty, useless posture over ugly, effective leverage. You have to pick one.
And that's it. Produced by FireflyHaku, who runs this show the way Trump ran Iran policy. He cuts funding to my dumbest ideas, enforces maximum pressure on my ego, and keeps the whole operation from collapsing into a European-style committee. Thanks for listening. Stay solvent, stay skeptical, and remember, the West wasn't unmasked because we were too harsh. We were unmasked because we were too scared to stay harsh. See you next time.